Depending on how the player has played Silent Hill 2, different kinds of endings can be achieved, which makes the process of interpreting them much more complicated. If the player acts like if he wants to find Mary and not play in a suicidal manner, then the live ending will be achieved. On the contrary, if the player behaves in a suicidal manner, then the in-water ending will be obtained. In case the player nurtured for the physical safety of Maria during the game, then the Maria ending will be achieved. And in case of having already completed the game before, the player can obtain the Rebirth ending by collecting a series of religious paraphernalia that weren't present in the first playthrough. Because of all these different possibilities, the way that we see James' personality also changes, complicating matters even further. For these reasons, the community could never come to an understanding on what is really the correct ending. Many tend to consider the live ending the most appropriate one, because in it James accepts his crimes and moves on with his life, adopting Laura in his way. This is in fact the happier of the endings, and it ties nicely with the possibility of James leaving purgatory and moving on to paradise. Besides that, at least in my experience, this is the most common ending to achieve. Nevertheless, there are some aspects that can't be ignored. As we have concluded in this analysis, Laura and the fog are creations of the Crimson One, and the fact that we see James in this ending walking along with her into the misty horizon may mean that James didn't understand anything of what happened. Notice that before this scene, James receives the imaginary letter from Mary again, and that the name of the song that plays during the credits, it's called Overdose Delusion. I believe that for those reasons, James is still trapped in an illusion and therefore hasn't moved on with his life. Because he received the letter again, he may even return to Silent Hill after the contents of this one start disappearing once again and the cycle is created. The Maria ending is even worse when it comes to James being completely lost in illusions. He doesn't even care if Maria is real or not, and decides to go back home with her anyways. However, when they are getting near the car, Maria starts coughing in the same manner that Mary did when she was sick. Again, the start of a cycle is suggested.
You'd better do something about that cough.
If we could accept the possibility of Maria being able to exist outside of Silent Hill in a metaphysical term, then it is implied that she would get sick just like Mary did, and would die eventually, leaving James in a much worse mental state. Notice again the letter that Mary wrote is given to James. The in-water ending is held by some members of Team Silent as being the true ending. If we think about it, there are various times where water is present in all sorts of strange places, and one can argue that this is a sign that James did in fact commit suicide by driving his car into the Toluca Lake. In order to achieve this ending, one must act with disregard for James's well-being, which is something that perhaps James himself would do because of his psychotic denial and etc. Unfortunately, James doesn't accept the reality of his crimes and decides to die instead. But if we have in consideration the probability of him being already dead and in purgatory, then nothing was solved, and he will come back to Silent Hill once again. As said previously, to obtain the Rebirth ending, one must have already completed Silent Hill 2 in the past. By normal standards, this would automatically make this ending not relevant, but consider the following. I believe that the act of replaying Silent Hill 2 is already part of the story itself. It is representative of James's return to Silent Hill various times and trying different approaches to try and solve his problem, but to no avail. In all the other endings, it is suggested that James will come back to Silent Hill because he did not understood the dimension of the problem he was in, or because he committed suicide. In this ending, James tries instead to revive Mary, and the outcomes of this action are unknown. The problem is that James, being already dead and in purgatory, he will only live after he successfully atoned for his sins, which is something that he does not do here, at least not entirely. Because of that, even if he successfully revives Mary, he will still be trapped in Silent Hill, and everything will start all over again. This raises an interesting possibility. Could Maria be the outcome of the Crimson Ceremony? Even if that was true, nothing will change anyway, since when James lives with Maria, in the Maria ending, she gets the same disease as Mary, and everything will start all over again. In all honesty, this sort of approach to the ending of this phenomenal game seems rather like a cop-out by the developers. Considering all the conclusions that we reached during this analysis, one can assess that there is an ending missing from the game. One ending where James does accept his crimes, repents them, yes, but accepts them, does not receive the letter from Mary, leaves a fogless version of the town alone, and sees a white light or something of that nature, suggesting his arrival at paradise. Nothing of this happening creates an eternal cycle, a conflict that is never resolved.